Here's something uncomfortable most men will never admit to themselves: she doesn't forget the men who did something wrong. She forgets the ones who did everything right. The ones who were kind, agreeable, easy to talk to, completely forgettable within a week. It sounds backwards, almost cruel, but attraction psychology has quietly confirmed this pattern over and over again, and once it clicks, there's no unseeing it. Most advice out there tells men to be nicer, more attentive, more available, more agreeable, as if forgettability were a personality flaw to be fixed with kindness. It isn't. It's a pattern built from 9 specific, everyday habits, and almost every man carries at least a few of them without ever noticing. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about recognizing exactly where presence quietly disappears into the background, and reversing it, habit by habit. Before this goes any further, drop a comment with the habit that hit closest to home, the one number that made a little uncomfortable click happen. That's exactly the kind of self-awareness most men never get access to, and it's worth naming out loud. If this resonates even slightly, hit like and subscribe now, because what's about to be broken down here isn't surface-level dating advice, it's 9 specific, research-backed reasons women stop thinking about certain men within days of meeting them. There's a particular kind of man who walks into every conversation with women already agreeing before she's even finished her sentence. He nods along, mirrors her opinions, and never once offers a thought of his own. It feels safe, even courteous, but this is exactly where things start to go wrong. Anyone who studies attraction psychology long enough starts to notice that agreement, on its own, builds nothing memorable. It simply confirms what she already thinks, and confirmation rarely leaves a mark. Think about the last time someone truly stood out to you. Chances are it wasn't because they said exactly what you expected to hear. It was because they brought something slightly unexpected, a different angle, a small disagreement delivered with warmth instead of hostility. That's the piece so many men miss when they're focused on reading women's body language and signs of attraction, but forget that words carry just as much weight as posture and eye contact. A man who never pushes back becomes, quite literally, forgettable. Here's a practical way to break the habit. The next time she shares an opinion about a movie, a restaurant, or even something more personal, resist the urge to simply say, "Totally, I agree." Instead, offer a small, honest counterpoint: "I actually see it differently, here's why." It doesn't need to be dramatic or confrontational. Just enough friction to remind her that there's an actual person on the other side of the conversation, not an echo. There's an old idea, one that shows up again and again in dating advice for men who've actually studied how attraction works: opinions are magnetic, agreement is invisible. A man who has genuine points of view, even ones she disagrees with, gives her something to hold on to afterward. Female body language signals often shift the moment a man says something unexpected: a slight lean forward, more sustained eye contact, an angled posture. That shift doesn't happen when he's just nodding along. Learning how to read women goes far beyond decoding body language attraction cues in the moment. It also means understanding that women, much like anyone else, remember friction more than flatness. A man who agrees with everything becomes wallpaper in a room he could have owned. And once he understands that, the next question naturally becomes even more uncomfortable: what happens when a man isn't just agreeable, but invisible in a completely different way, one where he never even lets her know who he actually is? Another trap looks like good conversation but quietly kills attraction from the inside. It's the man who turns every interaction into an interview, question after question, without ever actually contributing anything of himself. What do you do? Where are you from? What do you like to do on weekends? It feels engaged, even attentive, but it leaves her doing all the emotional labor of the exchange. Anyone who has studied dating advice for men seriously enough starts to see this pattern everywhere, and it almost always ends the same way: pleasant, forgettable, over. Picture 2 people at a dinner table. One of them asks question after question, nodding, taking mental notes, never once revealing an opinion or a story of their own. The other one shares something personal between questions, a memory, a belief, a small piece of who they are. Which one do you think she walks away thinking about? Reading women's body language in these moments often tells the real story. She leans in, she softens, she gets curious right back, but only with the person who gave her something to be curious about. Here's a practical shift that changes the entire dynamic. For every question asked, offer a piece of information first. Instead of, "What do you do for work?" try, "I've been thinking about switching careers into something creative. What about you? What's your relationship with your job?" That single adjustment turns an interrogation into an actual exchange. It signals that he exists in the conversation, not just as a facilitator of her talking, but as someone worth remembering. Attraction psychology keeps circling back to this idea of reciprocity. Signs of attraction rarely build one-sided. They build in the back and forth, in the moments where both people reveal something and react to what the other revealed. A man who only asks questions never gives her body language a reason to respond, because nothing is being offered that requires a reaction in the first place. Learning how to read women isn't just about noticing when she leans forward or holds eye contact a beat longer. It's about creating the conditions where that even becomes possible. A conversation built entirely on questions has no center of gravity, nothing for her attention to orbit around. And that raises an uncomfortable question of its own: what happens to a man who does share things about himself, but only when it's completely convenient, only when there's zero risk involved? Some men make themselves so relentlessly available that they end up disappearing entirely. Instant replies, always free for a call, always down to hang out whenever she suggests it. It reads, on the surface, like enthusiasm. But look closer and it actually communicates something else. Nothing else is going on in his life worth protecting. That absence of competing priorities gives her nothing to think about between interactions, because he's already handed her all of his attention before she even asked for it. Consider how attraction psychology treats scarcity across almost every context, not just dating. A restaurant fully booked out for months feels more desirable than one with empty tables every night. The same principle plays out in how women read men's behavior. A man who's always instantly reachable removes the natural tension that makes someone worth thinking about when he's not around. Signs of attraction often show up specifically in the space between interactions, the moment she wonders what he's doing, whether he'll text back quickly, whether he's thinking about her too. Here's a concrete adjustment worth trying. If she texts and he's in the middle of something meaningful, a workout, a project, time with friends, let the reply come naturally later instead of immediately dropping everything. This isn't about manufacturing games or playing hard to get for its own sake. It's about actually having a life full enough that responses come when they genuinely can, not the instant a phone buzzes. Women's body language signals shift noticeably around men who have their own gravitational pull, their own schedule, their own things pulling at their attention. Reading body language in these situations often reveals more engagement, more curiosity, precisely because he isn't hovering waiting for her next move. Men who study dating advice seriously come to understand that unavailability, the natural kind, not manufactured coldness, creates the exact space where noticing him actually happens. Learning how to read women means understanding that interest often grows in the gaps, not just in the moments together. A man who's always present removes every gap for her mind to wander into. And that leads to a harder question worth sitting with: what happens when a man does have his own life, but undercuts all of it the moment he opens his mouth to say something? A well-placed joke can carry an entire interaction, right up until the moment a man decides to explain it. He says something clever, catches a flicker of hesitation on her face, and immediately starts unpacking why it was funny, what he meant by it, why she should have laughed. And just like that, whatever intrigue the comment had evaporates completely. What could have landed as effortless wit turns into something closer to a nervous apology. Attraction psychology has a simple explanation for why this backfires so consistently. Over-explaining signals insecurity, an unspoken worry about whether what he said actually worked. Confidence, by contrast, trusts a comment to land or not land without chasing it down with justification. Signs of attraction tend to show up right in that gap of uncertainty, the half-second where she's deciding how to react. Killing that gap with explanation removes the very thing that made the moment interesting in the first place. A practical fix here involves resisting the urge to fill silence after a joke or comment. If it lands, great, let it breathe. If it doesn't land the way he hoped, resist backpedaling and simply move the conversation forward instead of circling back to justify himself. A comment followed by calm, unaffected silence reads as far more secure than one chased by 3 sentences of clarification. Reading women's body language becomes almost impossible in these moments, because over-explaining doesn't give her space to react naturally, it interrupts her own processing with more words before she's finished forming a reaction. Female body language signals often need a beat to develop, a slight smile, a raised eyebrow, a delayed laugh. Men who study dating advice for men closely start noticing how much they were talking over these natural signals without even realizing it. Learning how to read women also means learning when to stop talking entirely and let a moment exist on its own. A joke that needs defending was never as strong to begin with, at least not in the way over-explaining tries to convince everyone it was. And that opens up an uncomfortable pattern worth examining next. What happens when a man does hold his tongue after a joke, but only because he has no real personality behind it to defend in the first place? Plenty of men treat mirroring as the golden rule of connection, matching her excitement when she's excited, her calm when she's calm, her mood shift for shift throughout the night. It feels considerate, even attentive, but taken to its extreme it leaves him with nothing distinct to bring to the table. He becomes a reflection instead of a presence, an echo of whatever energy walks in the door rather than someone with a baseline of his own. Attraction psychology points to something counterintuitive here: consistency is often more magnetic than perfect synchronization. A man with his own steady energy, whether that's calm and grounded or playful and light, gives her something specific to measure herself against. Signs of attraction frequently show up in the moments where 2 different energies meet and create friction, not in 2 people simply mirroring each other into sameness. Without his own baseline, there's nothing for her energy to interact with, only a mirror reflecting itself back. A useful way to build this is deceptively simple: decide, before walking into a conversation, what mood he's actually bringing that day, not what he thinks she wants. If he's naturally low-key and relaxed, staying grounded even while she's animated communicates stability rather than disinterest. If he's naturally playful, keeping that playfulness alive even when she's more serious can create exactly the kind of contrast that becomes memorable. Reading women's body language reveals this shift clearly. A woman interacting with a man who maintains his own energy often shows more animated, more curious body language, leaning toward him, adjusting her tone to meet his, rather than the flat mutual matching that happens when both people just absorb each other's mood. Female body language signals respond to stability and distinctness far more than to constant emotional agreement. Learning how to read women also means learning to read himself first, understanding what he actually brings before trying to adjust to what she brings. A man who only reflects her mood gives her a mirror instead of a person. And that raises the next uncomfortable question: what happens when a man does have his own energy, but uses it entirely to chase approval instead of standing on it? Leading with compliments feels like a safe opener, a way to signal interest without risk. "You're so beautiful, I love your smile," dropped within the first few minutes of meeting someone. But this early enthusiasm, however well-intentioned, tends to flatten rather than build attraction. It arrives before any real connection exists, which makes it feel generic, interchangeable, the exact same thing every other man in her life has probably already said. Attraction psychology treats compliments the way it treats most rewards: value comes from scarcity and timing, not volume. A compliment given after real conversation, tied to something specific she said or did, carries weight precisely because it required actual attention to notice. One given in the first 60 seconds carries almost none, because it could apply to literally anyone. Signs of attraction build slowly through specificity, not through a rush of generic praise thrown out early to secure interest. A practical adjustment here involves simply waiting. Instead of opening with a compliment about appearance, hold it until something specific comes up worth acknowledging: a sharp observation she made, an unexpected sense of humor, a detail about how she handled something. The way you just explained that shows you actually think differently about this stuff lands entirely differently than "you're gorgeous" said 30 seconds into meeting someone. Reading women's body language after a well-timed, specific compliment looks noticeably different from the reaction to a generic early one. A genuine, earned compliment often produces a slight pause, a softer expression, sustained eye contact, because it required real thought to arrive at. Female body language signals rarely respond that way to something she's heard 100 times before from 100 other men. Learning how to read women also means learning patience with praise itself, understanding that timing changes meaning entirely. A compliment given too early competes with every other compliment she's ever received under the same circumstances. And that leads into an uncomfortable pattern worth examining. What happens when a man does wait to compliment her, but only ever talks about things that carry zero risk to begin with? Weather, traffic, work, small talk, the same handful of safe topics recycled through conversation after conversation. It feels low risk, a way to avoid saying anything that might turn her off. But playing it entirely safe carries its own hidden cost. Nothing distinct gets said at all. A conversation built exclusively on neutral ground gives her nothing specific to remember once it ends, because neutral topics rarely leave an impression on anyone. Attraction psychology often points back to a simple truth here: memorability requires some kind of edge, a genuine opinion, an unexpected piece of honesty, something that couldn't have come from just anyone. Signs of attraction rarely form around small talk about the weather. They form in the moments a man reveals an actual perspective, even a slightly controversial one, delivered with warmth rather than aggression. Safety, taken too far, becomes indistinguishable from blandness. A practical way to break this pattern involves introducing one genuine opinion per conversation, something with a little texture to it. Instead of only discussing where she's traveled, share an honest take. Honestly, I think most people romanticize travel way more than it deserves. Give me a quiet weekend at home over a chaotic airport any day. It doesn't need to be extreme. It just needs to be real, something that reveals an actual person underneath the small talk. Reading women's body language during these small moments of honesty often shows genuine engagement, a slight lean in, a curious tilt of the head, more direct eye contact as she processes something unexpected. Female body language signals respond to authenticity far more consistently than to safe, forgettable small talk that could belong to literally any conversation happening anywhere else. Learning how to read women also means understanding that safety, in excess, reads as absence rather than respect. A man who never risks an opinion gives her nothing specific to hold on to afterward. And that raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with: what happens when a man does share an honest opinion, but only ever waits for her to make every other move in the interaction? Passivity often gets confused with respect. A man who never initiates anything, never suggests plans, never leans in first, never says the direct thing he's actually thinking, tells himself he's being considerate. In reality, waiting entirely for her to lead the entire interaction removes the very thing that makes an interaction feel like it happened at all. Nothing gets initiated, so nothing gets remembered, because passivity by its nature leaves no fingerprint behind. Attraction psychology draws a clear line between respect and passivity, and they aren't the same thing at all. Respect means listening to her cues and honoring boundaries. Passivity means having no direction of his own whatsoever. Signs of attraction typically build around small moments of initiative, suggesting a specific plan instead of asking, "What do you want to do?" or making a clear, direct statement instead of hinting endlessly and hoping she picks up on it. A practical shift here starts small. Instead of asking, "Do you want to grab coffee sometime?" if you're free, try something more direct: "Let's grab coffee Thursday, I know a spot you'd like." The difference sounds subtle, but it completely changes the energy of the interaction. One version places the entire weight of the decision on her. The other shows a man who actually has a direction and invites her into it. Reading women's body language after genuine initiative often reveals relief as much as attraction, a softening, a visible sense that she no longer has to carry the entire interaction alone. Female body language signals frequently shift toward more openness the moment a man takes a small, confident step forward instead of waiting indefinitely for permission that was never going to arrive on its own. Learning how to read women also means understanding that initiative isn't aggression, it's presence. A man who never moves first leaves the entire interaction feeling like something that merely occurred rather than something he actually built. And that leads into one final, uncomfortable question worth exploring. What happens when a man does step outside himself in every other way, but still manages to disappear completely into whatever room or group he's standing in? Some men become nearly invisible the moment they enter a group setting, no distinct tone, no clear opinion, no presence that separates them from anyone else standing nearby. They laugh when everyone laughs, agree when everyone agrees, and vanish into the collective mood of whatever room they're in. It feels safe to move with the crowd, but blending in completely removes any reason for her to notice him specifically among everyone else present. Attraction psychology consistently points to distinction as the core ingredient of memorability, in groups even more than one-on-one. Signs of attraction rarely form around someone who behaves identically to everyone around him. They form around the one person in the room who holds a slightly different tone, a bit more calm, a bit more directness, a bit more humor, something that separates him from the collective noise everyone else is contributing to. A practical way to build this involves picking one small trait and owning it consistently across every social setting, whether that's a dry sense of humor, a calmer presence than everyone else, or a willingness to say the thing others are quietly thinking but won't voice. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be his, something recognizable enough that someone could describe him afterward without needing his name. Reading women's body language in group settings often reveals who's actually being noticed versus who's simply present. A woman's attention tends to gravitate toward the person whose energy stands slightly apart from the rest, more sustained glances, subtle repositioning toward that person within the group. Female body language signals rarely single out someone who behaves exactly like everyone else around him. Learning how to read women in these larger settings means understanding that presence isn't about volume, it's about distinction. A man who blends completely into every group gives her no specific reason to separate him from the crowd later, no name to attach to a memory, no version of him that stands apart from anyone else in that room that night. 9 habits, 9 small ways a man can quietly disappear from a woman's memory without ever realizing why. The uncomfortable truth is that none of these require a complete personality overhaul, just an honest look at where presence has been trading itself for safety. So here's the real question worth sitting with: which of these 9 has been running on autopilot without ever getting noticed, and what would it actually look like to change just one of them this week? Reading women's body language, understanding signs of attraction, learning how to read women, none of it matters if there's nothing distinct left for her to notice in the first place. Attraction psychology doesn't reward the man who does everything right by everyone else's standard. It rewards the one who shows up as an actual, specific, memorable person, opinions and all, energy and all, presence and all. This isn't information to nod along with and forget by tomorrow. It's a mirror, and the only way it does anything is if it gets applied starting with the very next conversation. Pick one habit, just one, and consciously break it this week. Notice what shifts. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is exactly the kind of self-awareness that separates men who keep guessing from men who finally understand what's actually happening in these interactions.